With exactly 1 year, a month and 10 days to the 2023 Nigerian presidential election, the debate on who takes over from the incumbent Muhammadu Buhari is gaining steam already. While many had expected President Buhari to give indications about his likely successor, as is practiced with many democratically elected Nigerian leaders, the president has decided to play his cards close to his chest. Speaking during an interview, President Buhari says he will not mention who the successor will be for fears that he or she could be eliminated.
Presidential election.
So, joining
to an average observer, the 18th February 2023 start date for the Nigerian general elections is still far away, but for the politicians, the build-up is already underway. The incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari is not qualified to contest in the presidential election, having completed the statutory 2 terms of 4 years each. This means that the race is open for fresh contestants. Although some politicians have indicated interest to run in that election, the number keeps growing by the day. While many political observers are busy making permutations about the next president of Nigeria, a former governor of Bauchi State, Issa Yuguda, has advised that the choice of Nigeria's next president in 2023 should be determined by competence ahead of other factors. But leaders from the southeastern part of the country believe that in the interest of fairness and equity, the next president should emerge from their region. The argument is that the region has never produced a democratically elected president of Nigeria. Earlier this week, President Muhammadu Buhari hinted that he had a choice of candidate already in mind, but refused to mention the name or the region where he or she will come from. Speaking during a live interview, Mr. President said the person he wants to succeed him in 2023 might be killed if he mentions their name at this stage. This has been generating reactions, with many wondering if Mr. President actually has more than a single vote in the determination of who becomes the next president. But his supporters are always quick to remind those asking that question that President Buhari has a right to support any candidate of his choice.
Now, joining us to discuss this is human rights and civil society activist Achike Chude, while Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, professor and head mass communication department based University of Abuja, will also be here to have this conversation with us. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Yes, want to possibly start and find out about, of course, arms in the air about this interview that has happened, a couple of days ago with Channels Television. So a few people, of course, have come out to say the president didn't, in fact, actually say that I have a successor. He just said he has a choice, a favorite, which he would not, want to disclose for fear of something happening to him potentially. Could we tear that apart and discuss what you make of this? And anyone can take this. Let's start with Achike Chude, please.
Yeah, well, obviously, it's expected that an outgoing president or a governor, for that matter, would be definitely interested in what happens after his exit, depending on his nature and his character, depending on his values, depending on what he's been able to achieve, depending on his motivation and his political philosophy. If he has done well and he believes he has done well, he would not want anything to undermine the legacy that he has established. And if he has not done too well, he is looking for a situation where his successor is going to protect him while in office. I mean, we see this all over Africa. So the issue of a successor is, critical, perhaps for different reasons, from that perspective. And obviously, the president, is a human being. He has his favorites. From what he has said, at least he did allude to that. But I hope the president was talking about the person that would succeed him first as a candidate of the All Progressive Congress, because he is not in a position to determine who succeeds him as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is clear. That is the choice of about 40, 45, 50 million Nigerians, especially if they turn up. If that number turns up at the polls, that choice will be theirs. But of course, it is critical that having, the APC being the party it is today, it is the party in power. It is the party with the infrastructure, with the structures, and the resources to make a significant input in determining the outcome of who becomes the president of Nigeria. I'm not exactly sure that I'm very comfortable about the president saying that if he mentions who his likely successor is going to be, that the person will most likely be eliminated. That is a problem because he speaks volumes about the level of insecurity in the country, and I do not expect the chief security officer of the country to say that. He shouldn't have. So from that perspective, it is very clear that he has an interest and he doesn't want to talk about it. There is no problem about that. But of course, there are so many people that would also understand from his body language where the president is leaning, towards. And again, you look at the geopolitics of the country itself. All of these things I want to believe are going to be factored in. So the president, I don't think, is in a position to determine that this particular person must come from this. He must take into cognizance all of the sensitivities of the Nigerian state today, especially at this particular point in time. They would also, form his opinion about who is most likely going to succeed him as a candidate of the All Progressive Congress, and maybe if now the parties go into contention for the election, who is going to succeed him as a president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
All right, let me bring in Professor Adeniyi now to pick it up from where Mr. Chude had stopped, particularly in the area where you mentioned that you were not comfortable, that's Mr. Chude, with what the president said about elimination. So, Prof, I'm interested in your thoughts and what you make out of that. Do you think that the president meant what he said, or was pun intended when he said that first of all, he said the party will decide, but then he said that yes, he does have an interest, but then if he mentions anybody's name, the possibility of elimination is very high. Do you think that he meant that in a literal form? And if he did, do you think that that's also an interesting pointer to the fact that there might be the possibility that who the president has his eyes on might not... Hello, Prof. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Prof. Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, Prof.
Hello?
Prof, we can hear you loud and clear.
It looks like we will have to work on the connection with Prof. But,
hello?
Mr. Chude?
Yeah.
Mr. Chude, what I was trying to... is actually like a follow-up to what you asked, and you heard what I was trying to ask Professor Adeniyi. Was that meant to be a literal thing?
Well, I hope not, and I think it's interesting that you pointed it out. So, for the purpose of clarity, now the president did not say exactly what he meant by that. We understand what elimination means, that you are taken out of the process. Now, but did he mean it in terms of a threat, physical threat to the life of the person that he's going to, he has, in mind, or is it being taken out politically? And like I said, if it was about the personal threat to the life of a person he has in mind, then I think that speaks volumes about the level of insecurity in the country. But if it's about, taking him out politically, then that's a completely different thing. And that would also give you an idea that the president is losing his touch because he is the leader of the party. But we also understand that as we get into the twilight of his administration, that he becomes more and more a lame duck president. And so some of the influences that he had at maybe in the first 5-6 years of his presidency, they would be waning as the days go by, and he's not going to be as influential and as powerful. And so maybe from that perspective, the political machinery and then the subterfuge, the intrigues that we play out will be such that the politicians, we just like vultures, will gather around the candidate that he has chosen and eliminate him politically. I want to believe that if that is what he meant, I think in the order of things, in terms of the politics that is played, it is allowed that you have some level of political maneuvering, that are lawful and and consistent with party politics.
All right, so Prof. Adeniyi, we understand you're back with us. Of course, we're still talking about the use of this term, elimination. which of course could be subject to so many different interpretations. But whether literally or figuratively, let's talk about what really does happen in the political scene in Nigeria when it comes to this kinds of situations. So whether or not the president was talking about this jokingly or there is some sort of strength to his statement, let's talk about what really does happen in the political scene when there is a likely situation, a similar situation, in your opinion, of course.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Abby and Steve. Sorry I lost you earlier on, or probably you lost me. But it's okay now that we're back on. And I remember about 2 or so years ago, some group of university teachers visited the president, and because they believed so much in him, they trusted him, they actually asked him to be courageous enough, to work towards having a definite successor. And he did told them that he's not going to do that, because if he does that, he's going to be to the disadvantage of whoever he chooses, So his interview the other day is not the first time that he's going to say, that he's going to talk about is a likely successor and whether he has interest in that successor or not. So to that extent, I don't think the question of elimination refers essentially to taking the person out or neutralizing the person, or in a dastardly way of saying, bringing about some kind of harm to the person. I think it's just political elimination in the sense that because you probably have a presidential backing, the political forces will now mass against you and they will work against you simply because you have an overarching support, from a center of power. That's the sense in which I want to see what the president is saying. But essentially as well, I don't think that's probably the reason why the president may not want to disclose who is supporting. If you look at him very carefully, he can be a very surreal person. He's not as forthcoming or as aggressive as the president of Obasanjo, for instance, who would deploy all within his means to say, okay, I want a president, a Yaradua to succeed me, and he went for it. President Buhari does not work like that, but as a human being, like my colleague said in Lagos, you expect that he will have his interest as well. But what is more important is for us to have a level playing ground so that the election can be free, fair, credible, and transparent, like we have always advocated. But for him to keep it in his chest for now, I think it's a good way to go, because it's still a long, in politics, a day or two, might also be like a year or two, but we still have a relatively long time to prepare. And if it comes out now to say, I'm backing candidate A or candidate B, we know what it means, for the career or for the ambition of other contestants who might as well be very, very competent, and capable of taking us out of the woods, as the case could be. Steve and Abby.
All right, Prof. Let me also still come back to you before we come to Mr. Chude here. Building on what you have said, the president made it clear that the reason why he didn't sign the amended electoral bill essentially was because he felt that political parties should be given the options in choosing their candidate. And he didn't limit it to just the direct and the indirect primaries. He also mentioned clearly that consensus could also be a factor. Do you think that the president is beginning to unravel, gradually, given the fact that, maybe he has an ace up his sleeves as to a candidate that he might have an interest in, and then he's saying clearly that don't limit the options of political parties to direct or indirect primaries, but also include that of consensus. Are we seeing something unraveling along this area, given the body language of the president?
All right, fantastic question, Steve. But beforehand, let's also make it clear that the question of presidents, anointing or supporting a successor is not peculiar to us. It's not peculiar really to Africa. We see it even across the world, even in a sophisticated democracy like the United States, not necessarily in a direct way, but through the instrumentality of the political party. Naturally, you want somebody, there will be a candidate that you favor from your party, and of course, you want your party to continue after you for the purpose of sustaining the policies and programs that you probably have been working on. And of course, no ideal person, politician or leader will want his legacy so quickly erased. And the best person to protect your legacy is the one who you back or the one who believes that you have backed him. But again, we shouldn't make, once more, we shouldn't make heavy weather about it, because we can't assume that if a president supports you, you are going to win. Because if that was the case, President Goodluck Jonathan, will have supported candidate Goodluck Jonathan, in 2015 to win the election. But of course, we knew how it all transpired. But we're just making assumptions, permutations, and to that extent, I agree. But again, going forward, it's okay to expand the avenues for the selection or emergence of candidates. A consensus is also is ideal. It takes away the usually rancorous process, acrimonious process, and probably can be cost-effective. And of course, we're a democracy, we should allow, for the expansion of these opportunities, these avenues for the emergence of parties, are consistent with freedom, that is inherent in the system, as the case could be, Steve.
All right, Mr. Chude, I want to bring you in on this. Of course, the president talked about, let's go back to the term legacy. He spoke about in that interview about how he would like for his administration to be remembered as that of, full of integrity, so to say, was the term that he used or danced around. Let's talk about that in terms of, do we agree with that? Of course, he still has a number of months to go. Do we agree with that? And of course, I also want to open this question up to in terms of who the successor would be. What body language do Nigerians have in terms of the expectations that they have of whoever the next Nigerian president will be? What expectations on ground for that successor? That's for you, Mr. Chude.
Yeah, well, a piece from Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, the face does not see itself except by reflection by some other things. So obviously the president is not in a position to judge himself. That judgment call will be made by the people who elected him, who made him president of this country. And so if you look at that and you look at the torrid situation that we have found ourselves in, both at the level of the economy, insecurity, anti-corruption, I'm not exactly sure that the legacy will be very positive for him. But I agree. Maybe it's something that I don't know whether it haunts him. The importance of that legacy, the importance of being remembered positively by the verdict of history. But I know some time ago he had said that he would not want to be disgraced by the insecurity in the country, by the terrorists, and that he was going to do his best, with regards to that. Recently, he also talked about that on different occasions. And I think about 3-4 years ago, he was wistful about and nostalgic about his days as a more youthful military leader. And he wished that he had the energy at that particular point in time to govern the country, especially at this particular point in time. And recently, one of the interviews, he also said, something about age not exactly being favorable to him. And again, these are statements that you do not expect the president to make, because what he's telling us is that there's a deficit in his person, and that if that deficit were not exactly, did not characterize him as a person at this particular point in time, he would have been a more effective leader. And the implication is that he knows that he does not have all the wherewithal, and yet he has remained as president of the country. And that's why I said I don't expect him to make, because it's an indicting statement for him. But beyond that, people are going to, and I remember, during the Jonathan presidency, when the president had rated himself and the PDP also had rated the president that he had performed well. I remember then, Ali Mohammed, who was spokesman of the APC then, and now the Minister of Information, coming out to say that they are not in a position that it's hypocritical for them to judge themselves, and that is not a call that they should make. Unfortunately, you see, they say what goes around comes around, and we have seen this also reoccur in this administration, where they rate themselves. Even like Mohammed rating his government, that the government has done well, the president has done well. Like I said, if the president were to run for a third term, for instance, assuming it were possible, people will make that choice. And I don't think, on the basis of what has gone on in the past 3 years in the country, that perhaps the decision that was taken by Nigerians in 2019, will be the same outcome again at this particular point in time, because the reality, we have to live with our reality. We have to live with the grinding poverty in the land. We have to live with the unemployment situation in the country. We have to live with the fact that they promised us to take us away from a mono economy and to do something at the level of agriculture, which has not been done, because the president, I think in his last interview, was saying that about 22.5% of Nigerian land is arable and is being cultivated. What have they been able to do? Yes, we can also provide excuses. The acts of insurgency that has gone on in the country that has also troubled the farming population, especially in parts of the north. But then this insurgency and these acts of terrorism and violence have persisted for about 12 years. So it has transcended his administration. Only that it has gotten worse. So yes, history, he wants to be remembered well. By history. I am not exactly sure. Unless something miraculous happens in the few remaining time that we have, perhaps maybe the only thing that people can remember is infrastructure, ultimately at the end of the day, and that's some level of infrastructure. So I think it's going to be a hard sell, for me to sit down now and declare that history will be very favorable to him. For me, I do not exactly have that impression. I think history, unless something happens, the verdict of history will be a little bit harsh.
Right. And what do Nigerians expect of their next successor, of the next president? What would you say Nigerians need in a president?
Yeah.
And this is probably open to both you and Professor Adeniyi as well. But very briefly, please, of course.
Okay. Well, I think Nigerians will want a president that is a Nigerian president, first of all. They want a unifier. They want somebody that speaks for all of us, regardless of religious inclinations and ethnic proclivities and all that. They want a Nigerian president that is sincere, that is committed, that is a statesman, that gathers everybody together under one roof. They want a statesman that also has a world view, that understands the dynamics of international relations and politics, and who also understands the nuances of the Nigerian Federation. A Nigerian president that also realizes that things cannot continue the way they have gone, and who also realizes that somewhere along the line we need to begin to talk to ourselves, that is the only way we can form the necessary consensus that is needed to build a country that works. A Nigerian, a president that will not deride at the issue of and the call and the clamor for some form of restructuring, so that people can sit down and discuss the basis of their togetherness, and so that they can move forward as a people, regardless of their various colorations. These are the kind of, and of course, an intelligent, Nigerian who understands economic dynamics, and then the need to build people and have that consensus to move the country forward. I think this is what Nigerians, a bridge builder, that is what Nigerians are looking for.
A bridge builder.
Will you have a couple of names in mind before we bring in Professor Adeniyi?
Well, just like the president said in his last interview, I have some names, but I will not mention.
But you're not the one handing over to them.
No, there's some brilliant people out there, obviously, but I would not want to give anybody.
Or are you also afraid of elimination?
Of the person being eliminated.
Elimination by substitution. Prof, what do you make of all this? What sort of a successor to President Buhari will you be looking at?
I hope you're not going to ask me to mention this.
Nobody wants to mention names, it appears.
Okay. All right, Steve, Alabi. Yeah, I think it cannot be better said than how Chude has put it. We want a Nigeria that will not, a leader that will not remind us of our differences. We want a national hero. Somebody who would not look at, from the prism of tribe, ethnicity, or religion. Somebody on whose shoulder we can lean. Where we're in distress. Somebody that can speak for us and we'll be proud of. Somebody whose brand is impeccable. And of course, we have many of these people. We have them aplenty. in the private and even in the political sector, in the political arena. Many names have been mentioned now. We can see them, we know them. They speak well, they are very articulate, they have a very good understanding. They have a helicopter view of what the problem of this country is, and of course, they have demonstrated pedigree on how to go about resolving some of our problems. They have, they've shown us evidence of an ability to find solutions and to work towards the development of this country through the prism of their vision. The problem we have had in the past, is that some of our leaders, having some kind of problematic vision. Their visions are limited, and of course, you cannot elevate growth and development beyond the vision of the leader. The leader is the one that galvanizes. The leader is the one, that lieutenants pander to. Sometimes it may not even come at the level of pronouncements, but maybe from his body language. If your body language is belittling, if it is reductionist, of course, it will affect the performance, productivity, and efficiency of lieutenant as well. But this time, we want a leader, who will be elevated, who will be above board, and who is very courageous, to take on the Nigerian problem without necessarily, pandering to our divides, to our classifiers. In the past, we have had semblances of this kind of leaders, and I'm sure we can repeat them. Really, we can mention names of how close we have gone in the past. But again, we can replicate them at the level of aping and idolizing the traits of these leaders, towards the growth of this country. We've got them aplenty, like I said earlier, and it's just for us to be careful, to look very carefully, and not allow patronage, not allow patronage, and prebendal disposition, to dictate for us moving forward.
All right, that sounds like a very colorful depiction, of course, of who our, successor would be, in the future. Or, a lot of people would argue, of course, that we have a lot of such individuals in the country who are an embodiment of all of these traits. However, the political climate might not allow for that to be fostered in terms of them even attaining that. Do we want to talk about that particular political climate in Nigeria? You've just highlighted some very, very stunning points, but some people could argue that that could be also a very idealistic approach towards it. What is the reality on ground for political ambition in Nigeria? And does the political climate here allow for that to actually materialize?
Well, can I answer?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Well, it's an interesting question you have asked, and I think what you tried to introduce is an element that might indicate that that certain political expectations, certain expectations from the people might not be met, even when you have the best candidates putting themselves up, for service. And then that means, it's a deeper conversation about the political system and the economic system again that the country is practicing. And then you have had, instances where Nigerians have been saying that we need to change the system, and that if we do not change this system, you bring in the very best of people, of political leaders, and then they are going to be compromised. We've had even, top government officials also talk about that there seems to be something within the system that makes good men become bad to some extent, and they're unable to deliver. Obviously, I cannot. The fact that we've had good people who have served in this country, and yet to some extent they have not been able to deliver, also goes to show that there might be some credibility there. But do not also forget that in this country we have had people like Dora Akonyele, who also had to operate under some of the under certain difficulties, and was able to make some level of achievement, and then again you also want to look at even at the economic situation in the country and the economic system itself. That implies that any particular leader that is elected as president, for instance, must practice an economic system that will ingratiate itself to certain, capitals of the world. I'm talking about the kind of capitalism, which is neo-colonial in structure and in shape. And so that, Nigerian leaders, for instance, are duty-bound to implement some of this. So we also need people who will sit back and also interrogate the system that we are practicing. whether they have worked, whether the capitalism as we know it, has actually worked in a way that has been effective, in a way that has met with the expectations of Nigerians. So these are critical issues that should be asked. But as to whether, the system itself is, unless, but again, you could have somebody who comes in from outside, even people who are within the system, who will take on the system itself that produced them, for the purpose of a greater of greater good, and then also make some achievements. But that is not going to happen without a rupturing of the system. There must be some level of that.
Okay. What is your take on this, Prof. Adeniyi? Would you say the political system is self-defeatist?
No, it cannot be self-defeatist. If you look at the evolution of systems and societies, there has always been a tension between man and system, between politician, the political process. So this tension will continue, but the onus is always on the individuals, on the politicians, on the leaders, to be forceful in terms of, pulling the system, within the ambits of his or her vision, So the person, the leader, the individual, is the pivot around which the system rotates, The individual is the springboard, and that's why we have seen great men across history, and that's why we have also seen great men across the Nigerian evolution, the evolution of the Nigerian story as well. There's a reason why we idolize people like Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Ahmadu Bello, isn't it? There's a reason for it, because their achievements remain legendary, and we can still see them even up till tomorrow. And over time too, we have seen people, who were close to their feet. Of course, in this system, of course, the feet of Murtala Mohammed are still there for us to see. Of course, he was cautioned by death. And of course, Moshood Abiola would probably have been another national hero, as somebody who wasn't going to remind us of our differences. But unfortunately, he was not sworn in, irrespective of his winning that election. So there are instances where we have seen people who are able to muster some kind of muscle, some kind of determination, and overrode the system, leading to achievement. Do not forget that Nuru Badu was in EFCC for 4 years, and it was outstanding. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi was Minister of Foreign Affairs for 2 years, and of course his legacy still remained. Very outstanding performance. Nasir Ahmadu El-Rufai was FCT Minister, and of course his legacy has practically been unsurpassable, arguably though. So we have had instances, flashes of individuals coming in, and overriding the system. Sometimes we'll talk about the system as being problematic, we know this, but we cannot allow that, to shape the course of events for us. We need those leaders, those individuals, whose vision, whose mission, whose cardinal objectives will be strong enough, to shape the system in accordance with, those virtues and values. Abi.
All right, Prof, stay with us. I'm still, still on this with you. How much of a burden do you think that a presidential endorsement will be to whoever the Buhari chooses? From what Mr. Chude has said in his analysis, it doesn't look like it's we've had the most sparkling performance since democracy returned 23 years ago. So if you have a Buhari saying either through his body language or hoo-ha, do you think that will be an advantage to whoever he has his eyes on? And do you think that he is the type that the candidate of APC can rely on to win at the general elections?
Well, Steve, that's a very interesting question. But, we're in a system where somehow things that we expect to bother us don't really bother us. We're not a system that is driven by merit largely, by performances largely most of the time. We just, our decisions sometimes come from because of extraneous reasons, reasons that you consider, that you see as not being ideal, from what obtains in some other climes, So we cannot be too arithmetic about these projections, but I do think that whoever the president supports, if he's if it comes out, forthrightly and said, I would rather want this person to succeed me as against this other person, that person is going to have a very good advantage over the other contestants, irrespective of what we think about the performance of President Buhari. Do not forget that President Buhari is still very much liked, irrespective of what we think of those performances. Some people still hold him as a hero, and of course, they cut across considerable sections of this country with commanding voter population, and we may not be able to discount that, irrespective of material conditions, objective conditions that we should ordinarily have spoken to the contrary. We're in a different kind of climate, where extraneous reasons condition actions, processes, and procedures. And of course, it's going to be to the advantage of whoever he chooses. But again, the other point to make is that we forget so easily as well. Do not forget, in the wake of our return to democracy in 1999, we condemned the military quite a lot, isn't it? We condemned the military, but no sooner had we moved into the democratic process, we started forgetting some of the things that the military people did to us, and they started returning again indirectly as leaders. And of course, when Obasanjo was leaving, some sections of people were also celebratory. But before you knew it, attention moved to Yar'Adua, and of course, after Yar'Adua, Jonathan. When Jonathan was leaving, he was going to be like the worst kind of president Nigeria was going to have. But now we have transported that notion to somebody because he has the fact of presence, And of course, who says that President Buhari will not benefit from that the ability of time to assuage things? Who says it's not going to benefit it in the next couple of months or days? So it's the nature of human beings, and Nigerians cannot be different. But overall, what we rather want is for us to have a level playing ground, where the democratic process can be enhanced, and we will not see a situation where we have to have another panel guiding us on how to develop, how to build our elections, or the processes leading to the emergence of leaders. Because we have to continue to remember always that democracy, the election is a festival of democracy, and we have come to terms with democracy as the right way to go. So all hands should be on deck. We shouldn't shirk our responsibilities in ensuring that processes are salutary, as the case could be. Steve and Abby.
All right, a level playing field is what we've been clamoring for a while, and we continue. Well, of course, we will still continue this conversation as we carry on. We're going to take a very quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be back shortly.